Hi, and welcome to Voice with Julia. And today we're going to talk about laryngeal tilt, which is a very important subject, not just for guys, but for sopranos and mezzos as well. And it's a bit of an understood concept in singing. So first of all, I want to explain what laryngeal tilt functionally is, what it actually is in our voices. And it is the correct tilting of the thyroid cartilage down and forward in relationship to the cricoid cartilage. Here's the cricoid, here's the thyroid, and it moves like this, okay? And what that does is it elongates the vocal folds, so the vocal folds stretch, and that assists with achieving higher pitches. Now, you might be thinking, as I'm describing this, well, okay, so when I sing a higher pitch, that's what happens. No. Okay, it may be happening, of course, to some degree, but the degree that we're going to talk about in this video is very different. What often happens, most people have compensations in regards to how they make pitches, and this is why people have problems in singing. And some people have exceptional vocal cords which can withstand a lot of compensations. So even if you're watching this and you're, a higher level classical singer, but you're like, I do have treble spots, this could be for you, okay? This really could, because it is not immediately apparent to me that just because you do have range and you do have a professional quality sound that you are utilizing the tilt function correctly. I think if you struggle with stamina issues, if there are issues with pushed or shouty tones, a little bit too much heavy vocal mechanism, this could be very valuable for you as well. And if you're a beginner at classical singing, this is really important to understand correctly right away, because if you can start your training with this in mind, you're going to avoid a lot of problems later on. Take my word for it. So we defined what laryngeal tilt actually is, which is the movement of the thyroid cartilage in a contraction, okay, with the CT muscle that moves the thyroid cartilage down and forward, thus elongating the vocal folds. This can be equated, the sound that you will hear when this is done correctly, it's a yawny sound, but you have to make sure that you're doing that sound with the right musculature. It's not done with the root of the tongue. It's actually done with laryngeal musculature, okay? Specifically, there is an anchoring of the larynx that should occur, a natural anchoring of the larynx with the sternothyroid muscles. If you don't know what that is, just have a look, and I think that'll help you map that a little bit. Now, I don't advocate for direct control over laryngeal musculature. It's rarely helpful, but it's a good idea to kind of have an idea of the mechanics and the physics properties that your voice operates under. Because if you don't have a correct understanding of that, then you can be led off the path pretty easily. There are a lot of teachers out there that literally have no idea about this stuff. And if they are teaching you ways of singing that are in direct opposition of physics, we know how that ends, okay? We know what happens to the apple, it falls from the tree. So you can't deny these principles. And so if you want to go look up how your voice works, look up the musculature, look where it contracts. I think this can provide some context. Of course, it doesn't make you sing better. I want to be very clear. A lot of this technical knowledge, it is for troubleshooting. It's when you're having an issue. It's not necessarily to be used as the way to sing. We sing, there is a large component of intuition and mimicry and play and freedom that comes into really great singing. This is not like manipulating muscles here and there. However, when people run into trouble, it is so important to know what is going on in the voice. Okay, so now I will jump into how we know that we are tilting our larynx and where we need to be aware of tilting our larynx. In classical singing, which is what I deal in, I don't deal in anything else, you need to be tilting your larynx basically from the lowest note of your range. This is my belief. This will provide you the best possible recipe for ease and success in singing. And what I mean the bottom of your range, well, this will be for another video, but we want to explore the absolute depths of our range. That is very important for building full vocal function so that we have a coordinated vocal system of our thyroarytenoid muscles, which is the muscle inside the vocal fold. We also have the CT muscles, the intra-arytenoids. All of these need to play together nicely. And what often happens, and especially this is what I see as an aesthetic problem in our current day and age that I don't think was so prevalent maybe 50 years ago or before that for sure. But this is the aesthetic of how the pop sound has gotten into our understanding of classical singing. And this is where I think the laryngeal tilt goes wrong. And this is also sometimes in voice therapy crowds, this is also misunderstood. For classical singing, the tilt function is essential to preserve the strength of the voice without compromising vocal health. When we sing classical music, opera specifically, it is high octane, carrying over an orchestra at the heights of our voice, and we have to be able to do this for hours. The safest way to do this is if the setup is such that we are using the least amount of force and that we are optimizing our system to function under the most freedom and flexibility. But freedom comes from form, and most everybody, myself included, from, when we started singing, we are not free, okay? Even from day one, if you started singing as a kid, that doesn't mean you're free, because there can be vocal maladaptations. Now, I want to be clear also, when you're not singing free, it doesn't always sound bad to people. So please keep this in mind. This is very important when unraveling vocal identity as we explore the laryngeal tilt and how that can change our identity. So my belief is that we employ the laryngeal tilt immediately as soon as we start to go up the scale from the lowest note of our range. Now, why do I say this? Because think about this just from a physics science perspective. If you are balancing muscles, you're singing the lowest note of your range, and now you want to move up in pitch. The correct way, as I've just explained earlier in the video, to move up in pitch is to use this correct action of the larynx, that the thyroid cartilage comes down and forward, the CT muscle contracts in order to accommodate this. Now, along with this tilt function has to happen a pharyngeal opening and then dynamic opening. So let's call this pharyngeal anchoring, okay? It's able to dynamically stay open while we have this tilt function. So if we're gonna start down here, so what happens is that I am employing, as I go up the scale, already the tilt, the CT muscle engages in order to provide the correct balance of all the muscles as I move up the scale. A way that you would do this that does not employ the tilt function would be, now I have a noticeable break right here. But if I go, now you notice I don't have that lower passaggio break because I'm already scaling the tension of the vocal folds, the thickness of the folds, the tilt of the cartilage, and the pressure, the medial pressure. Already I'm calibrating that balance down low, and I'm keeping that calibrated as I go up. So I don't have a need to suddenly calibrate. Now I'm caught, and I really cannot move up higher in my range without feeling very restricted. So how this plays into vocal identity is because I went on this rant a little bit about how pop music has sort of come into our understanding of classical vocal production, and that couples along with the therapy world that has gotten a lot of their research from more contemporary styles of singing. And there's nothing wrong with contemporary styles of singing. I want to be clear about that, just not what I do and not what I'm talking about. So why this is important is because we're often given a much higher laryngeal set point that is perceived as appropriate for our, let's call it middle voice singing, okay? So things that are not high. And with that comes already laryngeal musculature imbalance. So that when the demands of the repertoire come, if you're lucky, maybe you can skate around it. There are a lot of exceptional singers that can skate around that problem, and there have been in the past too. But in general, that's not really the way that works best. And so you often see singers starting out well in their 20s and early 30s and then running into problems. It might be perceived as a natural sort of progression of, oh, they're singing too much, the technique's not quite solid, breath support, and people are throwing around these things, oh, singing too heavy. Yeah, okay, all of these things, correct. So what often happens is there is an imbalance in that laryngeal musculature already from an early point in the singer's life. But the voice still sounds good, right? Because it's nice, it's clear, it's beautiful. And then that imbalance will gradually be seen, and the singer will resort to more and more compensations. And so then that's when these problems come up, and it sounds like, oh, well, maybe it's the breath support, maybe they're singing too heavy, and all of these things are for sure an issue. But can be circumvented with this idea of laryngeal tilt. And this is not laryngeal tilt in isolation. This is how it dynamically interplays with the pharyngeal shaping and the laryngeal anchoring. So all of these things must be present in order for the freedom of the larynx to operate correctly. In voices that are stronger, okay, so more TA dominant voices tends to be more dramatic voices. This is absolutely essential, or you won't be able to sing the repertoire. In lighter voices, though, this is also essential, because what can happen is if this balance is not sort of calibrated early on in the scale, the voice can pop up. High notes are more like whistly. They don't connect to the body. And that can also cause its own type of fatigue and stress on the instrument. So they're basically two different auditory manifestations of the same issue, which is this laryngeal tilting. Okay, so how do we work on this? I say the best way to work on anything is in the middle voice, okay, where you have the most control. And you may notice the biggest problems here. I like to work with an oo vowel. The oo vowel keeps the larynx in a naturally lowered place, and you can see it if I go ooh, ooh, ooh. Now I want to be clear, the base of my tongue is not pushing. However, when the larynx lowers, you may see the tongue kind of pushing here, but it's not pushing. It's just what happens when the larynx lowers, the tongue is connected to the hyoid bone. So you will see a natural lowering, and it will descend somewhat into the vocal tract. Okay, and on someone with an anatomy like mine, you will see it. Now that is not the same as tongue push. And how do you know your tongue is pushing? Put your forefinger on your chin, press in here, ooh. If it's hard, your tongue's pushing. If it's not, it's fine. Okay, then you just have tricky neck like me, fine. Okay, so a good way is to get into your middle voice. Ooh, ooh. Now, probably some of you may have issues with this, and you may get something like this. Ooh, ooh. Don't try to put point on the voice right now. Try to find the lowest set point. Ooh, like you're pulling in the sound and you're stretching from here to back here. Ooh, like you could say, ooh, oh, you'll feel that musculature kind of activate. That's where you want to work from with this exercise. So we'll just go, ooh, and I'm using a really closed embouchure, almost like an SOVT, slightly, okay? Very closed ooh embouchure, just to give myself some back pressure. And what I do is I slide to the upper pitch, and I feel that this larynx goes down and forward. So let's all take a hold of our larynxes. You're gonna place your hand between the hyoid bone and the thyroid cartilage. If you don't know what that is, I want you to go look up a picture. We'll put one here, somewhere there. And you're going to note what the larynx does. So when I go, ooh, the larynx shouldn't come up. You should feel this tilting action. Ooh. So the thyroid cartilage goes like this, down and forward, the notch, the Adam's apple. Okay? And you're going to work this everywhere in your middle voice. Ooh. And you'll feel that back pressure, that sucking. Do not put the voice forward. Don't do that. Don't do that. Keep it low, okay? Keep it anchored. You'll feel almost like you're talking like this. This is right, okay? This is a very good place to work with the voice. Don't put the voice here. That is false brightness. That is compacting the vocal tract and putting forward pressure onto the voice, and lots of injuries happen from that positioning. So if you're experimenting with this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I actually sound like a completely different person, then most likely I would say to you, your larynx has been too high. And if that causes a vocal identity issue, then you want to unpack that a bit, because you've got to get behind your new sound for this to take hold. It is really important that you get behind that new sound, because it's going to be the quickest way to recovery. These are muscles and they will respond very easily with work. But if you're in your mind thinking, ooh, no, this sounds too dark, I don't know what to do. But you'll notice that if you work on this function, your top will become so much easier. The passaggio won't be an issue anymore, and you'll just have so much freedom, so much more stamina than you have ever had. Of course, this is a short video. I don't expect you to fix your entire technique from this video, but I hope that maybe this video gives you a starting point to look at your own singing and say, hey, you know what? This may be a problem that I'm not aware of. And I will say one last thing about laryngeal tilt. When we get this calibrated, the whole system calibrated correctly, you will notice that it demands a different kind of support. And then the support comes naturally from this. It is not something that we put on the voice, okay? The laryngeal musculature, the descent of the larynx, the vocal folds coming together, all of that demands a certain amount of subglottic pressure. Now, of course, if you're a beginner and you're still developing all of these muscles, you're gonna have to work on that. But I'm talking about the strategy while you're singing. This is not something that's going to require pushing, pulling, prodding. It's going to demand a certain amount of subglottic pressure, and then you're going to have to supply it or not, right? Of course, that's for another video. But I hope that this gets you started on what laryngeal tilt is, how it can help your singing, and one little exercise that you can do to start to work on this muscle and start to keep this in your entire, your entire scale of singing. Okay, your singing scale. Oh, that, not, oh, don't do that one. Oh, so you feel that connection to the voice, that relaxing feeling. I hope this helps, and I will see you soon.